We learned in the Mishnah, we begin today, first, on Daf Mem Zayin Amud Beis, the bottom of the Amud, 2 lines from the bottom of the Amud. So what did we learn in the Mishnah? Yochanan Kohen Gadol, Hever Edoyes HaMaisa Cholo. Yochanan Kohen Gadol removed the mitzvah of confessing once in 3 years about all the maisres. It's not really a confession, but it's more like just saying that you gave all maisres and the Eibishter benches you for this. So he stopped this. My time, Zok the Gemara, what was the reason for this? Because in his times, the maisres were not given the way to the person or to the people that it's supposed to be given to. Why is that? The Torah says Meiser Rishon should be given to the Levi, to the Leviim. But Va'anan Kayavina L'Kainim. But we, in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, the Meiser Rishon was given instead to the Kainim. So Rashi here brings from the Gemara and Yevamis that Ezra made a knas, a penalty on the Leviim, that because they didn't join him, they didn't come up to the second Beis Hamikdash together with him. So therefore he said that all the Meiser from that point should only be given to the Kainim. Now in the lashon of the pasuk, when you say the vidu, you say v'gam nesativ leLevi. I gave my Meiser to the Levi kechol mitzvascha, but we don't give it to the Levi, so it can't be said. Frag the Gemara, so v'loidi ashar Meisres. So why can't you say the vidui for the other maisres? So you skip this pasuk or this part, but still the other maisres are being given in the right place. Rish Lakish says, Kol bayis she'em misvada al maiser rishon. Any home that cannot be misvada, that cannot say the whole nusach, including the maiser rishon that's given to the Levi, shuv a misvada al shar maisres. You cannot say the vidui for the rest of the maisres either. My taiva, what's the reason for this? Abai explains, because the pasuk, when it begins the vidui, this is the first thing. It starts with that pasuk, v'gam nesativ leLevi. So therefore, if you can begin with this, then you could say the rest of the maisers. But if you can't begin with this, you can't. If it would be at the end, maybe you could say you could skip it at the end. But if it starts with this, so then if you can't say this, you can't say the whole vidui at all. Sagt the Gemara, or fragt the Gemara, Meklal da frushi hava mafreshi. What does it sound like over here? What are we saying? That they would separate the maisres, but they would not give it to the Levi as the pasuk says. Instead, they gave it to the Kainim. But it sounds like that they did separate the maisres properly. But fragt the Gemara, is that the case? In the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, we see that they weren't even giving, they weren't even separating. That is, they weren't even separating the maisres at all. Tanya, we learned in another brayse, Afu bittul savidui, that Yochanan Kohen Gadol, he was mevatel the vidui as we just explained, but also the gazar ala demai. He was geyser regarding demai, which is the produce that's you're not sure if the maisers was separated. So he was geyser that you buy from an amma oretz, you have to separate the maisers because it could be it wasn't separated yet. And why is that? What happened in his times? He sent around to inspect what's going on by Yidden in all the different cities they were living in. And he saw the only thing they were giving is that the truma that goes to the kain. But when it comes to Meiser Rishon, which goes to the Levi or to the kain, as we said before, or Meiser Sheni, which you bring to Yerushalayim, there was some that were separating these Meisers. But in Miksasan a Meisren, there were others that did not give these Meisres. So he said to the Yidden then, Banai, my children, Bayu, Va'emer Lechem, let me come and I'll tell you what's the story here. Gishem, Shatrum Gedayla, Yeshba Ovem Misa. Just like a person that does not separate the Trum Gedayla, so the punishment for this is Misa B'dei Shemayim. Kach, Trumas Meiser, so too if a person eats from Trumas Meiser, that's the truma that the Levi has to separate from his meiser to give to the Kayin. And v'tevel, or the produce that the trumas meiser was not separated of it, yesh ben oven misa. There's also, this is an aveda that you chayiv misa b'dei shemayim as well. So therefore, he's telling people that they should be very careful about this. So now Omad v'Hizkiah and Yochanan Kohen Gadol, he made the takana, he instituted lehem for them, halikeach peiris me'ama oretz, a person that buys produce from an amma oretz, so you don't know if you gave the maisers or not, mafresh mehen meiser rishon and meiser sheni. He should give again, or maybe for the first time, the meiser rishon and meiser sheni. Meiser rishon, and then from the meiser rishon itself, mafresh mimena trumas meiser. He also separates a trumas meiser that goes to the kain, and v'noisna lekayin, and he should give this to the kain. And the reason why you have to give it to the kain is because there's an issa to eat from this. If you eat from this, you chayiv misa b'dei shemayim. So therefore, that has to be given to the kain. Even though it's only a suffix, but there's an isser involved, so you have to give it. Now, mafresh mimeno trumas, umaisa sheni that is. You also separate maisa sheni. And oile v'oichle b'Yerushalayim, and you take your maisa sheni and you eat it in Yerushalayim. Now, maisa rishon and maisa rani. The maisa rishon and the maisa rani also has to be separated, but you don't have to go and actually give it to the Levi or to the Kohen or maisa rani to actually give it to the poor people. And the reason is, says the Braisa, because because over here, Meiser Rishon and Meiser Ani, again, Meiser Rishon and Meiser Ani is something which you have to give to the Kohen or to the Aniyim, but there's no Isser to eat it. It's something that any Yid could eat as well. So therefore, the hafroshe, to separate in order to be matter your produce to eat, that you have to do, because it's a suffix, it's demai. But to actually give it to them, so then it's just a question of who's the owner of this, who it belongs to. So for that we say, on the other hand, before, when it comes to the Trumas Maisa, when it comes to the Truma Gedaila, when it comes to things where it could be a Isser Misa, if you eat from it, so then you can't say over there because of a suffix, you have to actually give it to the Kayin. But what's the point? The Gemara is proving it from this Braise that the Yidden did not necessarily B'chlal separate the Maesters properly. So why are we saying before that they separated it? And the reason you can't say the Vidui is because they weren't giving it to the Levi, they gave it to the Kayin. Here we see that in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, they weren't even separating properly. So the Gemara answers, you're right, Tarti Tikkun, that there were both of these issues. And therefore Yechoneh Kohen Gadol instituted two things. As we learned in the Mishnah, Bitel Vidui, the Chavedim, what he was mevatel was the vidui, even of the Chavedim, even of those people that are keeping the mitzvahs, and they could not say the vidui properly because of the penalty that it's not being given to the Levi the way the pasuk says. And then besides that, the gaz that altmai shalom yoretz. And then, as we said, that many of Yidden and Klal Yisrael were not separating the ma'ases b'chlal, and therefore he made this gzeira of demai that any time you buy from an amaretz, you have to give the ma'ases again. So two different takanas that he instituted. The next thing he said in the Mishnah was Va'afu bitl asam ma'iridim. He was also mevatel those ma'iridim. Ma'iridim, they are the Levim and the Beis HaMikdash that were singing, as we see, the Gemara explains it here. My ma'iridim, what does this mean, ma'iridim? Omar rachba rachba said, yoim v'yoim, every day in the Beis HaMikdash, yoim dim Levim al duchan, the Levim stood on a platform and they would sing in the Beis HaMikdash, v'oimrim, they would say, Ura lama sishan Hashem, awaken, why does Hashem sleep? So he was mevatel to say, he shouldn't say this. Omar lehen, so Yechoneh Kohen Gadol said to them, "V'chiyesh shina lefnei amakim." Is there sleep by the Eivishter? V'halek farnemar hine lo yanum v'lo yisha and shoym Yisrael. That there's no sleep by the Eivishter. Ella, so rather, b'zman Yisrael shtruyim v'tzar, when Yidden are in a time of suffering, v'yivdikachavim benachas v'shalva, and the goyim are peaceful. On that, the pasuk is saying that the Eivishter Kaviyachal should not sleep and should come and help the Yidden. So what's the pshat in this? The Mashal over here explains that this pasuk Ura L'Masishin Hashem relates to the Yidden in the time of Golus. That in the time of Golus, then there's Kaviyachal a concept of Shina L'Mayla. But then, in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, the Beis HaMikdash is still standing. So Yechoneh Kohen Gadol says, now in this time period, why are you saying this pasuk of Tilim, which relates to the time of Golus? Now you shouldn't be saying this pasuk. In Chassidus, there are Maimor and Barucha. There's a famous Maimor Balayla Hu. Tavshimem Dalet, and in other places where it's explained what's this concept of Shina L'Mayla. Shina shows on a Hisiluk HaChayis, on a Helen Vehesta, like when a person sleeps, his Chayis goes away. So Kaviyachal L'Mayla, when Yidden are in Golis, there's also a Siluk, there's a big Helen Vehesta. So, but he didn't want them to say this in the time when the Beis HaMikdash is still standing.
Why did they say it?
Okay, it's a good question. Okay. There's Noikfim. Another thing it was mevatel was Noikfim. What does Noikfim mean? My Noikfim. Noikfim means when you strike something, what exactly were they striking? When they brought a carbon, for example, a calf, and before the shchita, so they would scratch it by its horns between its eyes, or between the horns, that is. So then blood would come down, and the blood would go into its eyes. And what was the point? So then the behemoth sort of couldn't see what's doing, and therefore it would be easier to shecht it, to tame it, and to be able to shecht it. Now, Asa Ihu came Yechoneh Kohen Gadol, batal, and he nullified this custom. Because it looks like a mum, even though it wasn't, but it looks like a mum, so therefore he didn't want this to be done. The Masnita Tana, in a Braisa we learned a different version of this, that they would hit the animal over the head with a stick, and that would cause it to go down, to be able to shecht it. Now, but this was something, this is the way it was done also by Avodah Zarah. So Amalahem, he said to them, until when are you going to give the Mizbeach a carbon which is an Nevela, which is not being shechted? So the Gemara asks, what's this expression, Nevelis? Nevelis? It's Nevelis to the Mizbeach. It's going to be shechted afterwards. Ella treifis. What he meant is a treifa. Why treifis? Because Shem nikiv krum shel mayach. Because possibly when you beat the animal with this stick on its head, so it could be there's a certain part above the brain that gets a hole in it, and therefore it's a treifa. So Ahmad instead, Kain Gadol got up, he instituted them tabois bekarka. They had these rings that they put into the ground, and that's where they stuck the head of the animal into these rings, and that's how the shechita was done. So this all began in his times. Right, so the Mefarshim explained that it's not the pshat that until that point, when they beat the animal over the head, there was a serious concern of treifa, because in roiv cases it does not become a treifa, and you can rely on the roiv. Elamai, nevertheless, he said that we should be extra careful, and you should still not do this, and therefore he instituted to put them instead into these rings. Ad Yamav, until this time, so Yepatish Mata B'Yerushalayim. The hammer was still banging Yerushalayim. When was this? B'Chayli Shal Mayid. On Chol Mayid, even though a Dover or Ovid is allowed, but nevertheless, he made a takana because there was so many people that was working on Chol Mayid, there wasn't the covet for the Yom Tov, so therefore he decreed that they should not do any work in Chol Mayid. Kol Yamav Le'oyad Tzarech Lishal Alad Mai. Earlier in the last point it said in the Mishnah that in his times, nobody had to ask regarding the Mai. So it says the Gemara, this is like the Braisa we brought before, because he instituted that any person that buys from an Amaretz has to separate all the meisters again. So if you have one chaver that's buying from another chaver, he can be sure that he took care of it, because there's an institution already. It was takana that he has to separate the meisters again. So you don't have to ask anyone about this. Sagt der Heilige Mishnah, Batla Sanhedrin. When the times of the Chorban, when the Sanhedrin was bottled, they left the Beis HaMikdash, bottle, Hashir, mi Beis HaMishtais. So also at that time, singing by chasanas and places where you drink was also bottled. Not that, so they were masakin not to sing, not to play music, and not even to sing in the by chasanas. Shenema b'shir lo yishtu yayim v'goyim. The place where you drink, so you should not sing there. The Gemara is going to discuss the details of this takana, not to have songs and music bisman hazeh. When the earlier Nevi'im passed away, batlu urim v'tumim. So the urim v'tumim stopped functioning. When the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, batl hashamir, the shamir, this worm that was a supernatural worm that's able to split things, that stopped working. V'noifes tzufim, and noifes tzufim also stopped. The Gemara is going to bring a few interpretations what noifes tzufim means. Upaske Anshe Amanim Yisrael, and the Anshe Amanim, the people that had a belief in the Eibishter, they also seized amongst Eden. Shenem, the pasuk says, Ashia Hashem ki Gomar Chassid v'Gomer. Help me Hashem, because Gomar Chassid, and the pasuk continues, Kifasa Amunim b'Bnei Adam. There's no more those believers amongst people. Rab Shimon Gamliel says, hey, the Rabbi Yeshua testified, Miyoim Shechara Beis HaMikdash, and Yom she'ein by klala, there's no day that there's no curse in the world. The tal does not come down for a blessing, it comes down for the opposite. V'nitel tam haperis, the real good taste of fruits were removed. Rabbi Yossi says av nitel shuman haperis, the fatness of the fruits were also removed. Rab Shimon ben Elazar hatara nitla, purity was removed. Again, when hatara, that is, this is the way you read it, that hatara, when there was no more purity in the world, so then nitla esatam v'sareyach, then the taste and the good smell of the produce of the fruits was also removed. Hamaisris, when people were not careful with maisris anymore, notlo as shuman adogan, so the fatness of the dogan of the grains was also removed. Chachamim say hasnus v'akshafim, the inappropriate behavior and the kishuf. There is also kilo esakel that destroyed everything. So the Gemara, starting with the first thing that it says regarding the chorban. After the chorban, so then no more the songs and the music. So it brought the pasuk that said b'shir lo yishtu yayin. Umimai frek the Gemara. How do we know the Mishal Batla Sanhedrin Siv that pasuk says in connection to the chorban when the Sanhedrin was removed from the Beis Hamikdash? Amar Rav Huna bered Rav Yeshua. Da makra, because there in the pasuk it says Zekanim Mishar Shabasu, that the Zekanim, they're removed from their gates. The Zekanim refers to the Sanhedrin. Bachurim, again, Zekanim Mishar Shabasu, Bachurim Meneginasam. So therefore the Bachurim, the ones that sing, also they stop singing. So these two go together. Amar Rav said about this. Udna, the Shama Zimra, the ears that listen to songs being sung today, Bizman Hazeh, Teyaker, should be uprooted. Amar Rava said, Zimra bebeisa, a house that has in it Zimra, that they're singing in it, Bizman Hazeh, after the Churban, Churba beseifa. So then on its threshold will come a destruction. Sheneva, the pasuk says, Kol Yishoyer Bachaloin, you hear in the windows of a home that they're singing there, Cherev Basaf. There's a sword at its threshold. Ki arza ora. Now, what is this? Ki arza ora. The last few words of the pasuk over here, like a cedar ora. What does this mean? My ki arza ora. Amar Rav Yitzchak. So Rav Yitzchak asks, does this mean bayis hamasubach ba'arozim, a house that is covered with cedars? Iru, is it like a ora? Is it like a city? What does the pasuk mean? Ella, rather, the way to translate this pasuk is afila bayis hamasubach ba'arozim, or some say mesuchach, even a house which is covered with cedars, with very strong wood, misraya. It becomes weakened, it becomes what? Destroyed. Amar Rav Ashi says, Shmamina, from here we understand, ki maschal churbe b'seifa maschal. When the destruction of the home begins, it begins at its threshold. Shanema cherev basaf, the sword is at the threshold. V'baisayim mahacha, or the source is from another pasuk, where the pasuk says, v'she'iyah yukas sho'ar, that the she'iyah, the desolate, or the whatever destruction comes, it comes at the gates, at the entrance of the home. And what this means is, as the Gemara here now says, this refers to the fact that in the place where there's singing in the home after the Churban, so then Shadim come into the home and destroy it. I saw this myself, and the Shadim that were there were goring like an ox. Rav Huna says, Zimra, the Nagdi u the Bekari, the singing of those that are pulling ships, or those that are leading the cattle or the oxen in the field to do the plowing in the field, shari. That's allowed. Because that's being done for the purpose of the work. That rhythm creates the possibility for the animals to go in the right place and so on. But the gardoi, the weavers, when they sing to themselves, asr, that's not allowed because they're just singing for pleasure. Doesn't help them in their work. Rav Huna, that is, batal zimra. He nullified, he made sure that there should be no, this takana of not singing bisman hazeh, he made sure that it should be fulfilled. So what happened? Kom meya avzi bezuzah. So 100 ducks, the price of it went down to 1 zuz. It became so cheap. There was such an abundance of it available. Umeya sa echiti bezuzah. And 100 sa of wheat, also the price went down to 1 zuz. And it was so cheap and it was so available and plenty that no one was even buying it at all. Also Rav Chisda, then Rav Chisda, he came, zilzilba, he belittled this isser of singing. What happened? The opposite happened. If you were looking for just to buy a duck for one duck for a zuz, you couldn't even find. So the price changed completely. So this whole discussion the Gemara is having here regarding Zimra B'zman Hazeh, this is brought in Shulchan Aruch, in Yeridea, and this is an Indian that Rambam brings it, in Shulchan Aruch brings it. But so you may ask, so what's going on? Why is there singing or music B'zman Hazeh, seemingly without any limitations at all? So the only two Ateirim that there are is one Heter that the Rif says and the other Rishayim say is that if it's being done for the purpose of Yiras Shamayim, or if it's being done to praise the Eibishter, he's singing psukim that are praising the Eibishter, so then it's not singing for your own pleasure, it's singing to express your praise to the Eibishter. That's allowed. And then there's the other heter that it says in Paiskim, if a person needs, like similar to what it says here, if a person is using the music or the singing regarding work, it creates a certain rhythm in his work. So if a person needs the song in order not to be depressed, in order not to be, for a person that's sick, so then you're allowed to use the song. So people say today, without music, without singing, everybody would, the galus is so difficult, everybody would be so depressed, so you need to have all this music to lift up people's spirits. That's the heter for the music, B'zman Hazeh. Yeah, there's a famous tshuva of Rav Moshe Feinstein, Igris Moshe, one of the first Karachim there. He was very machmer with negate to music. He over there writes, I think it was regarding a dinner. He didn't want them to have a band and music and entertainment. He held that it's a serious issue, and especially based on the Rambam, the way he brings it, that it's also even B'zman Hazeh. Okay, there's also discussion because there's a difference if it's music or if it's because in our Gemara it's mashma, even singing by mouth. He brings over here the weaver. The weaver doesn't have musical instruments while he's weaving. He's just singing. And still the Gemara says that it's also Bisman Hazeh. Sagt the Gemara weiter. Omer Rav Yechanan said, skipped one line. Omer Rav Yosef, that is. Rav Yosef said, Zimri Gavri, if it's men that are singing, Va'ani Noshi, and the women respond to their singing, Pritzusa. It's a pritzus, you're listening to the voice of a woman singing, Kail Beisha Erva. But if it's the reverse, Zamri Noshi, if it's women that are singing, Va'ani Gavri, and men are responding to their singing, that's much worse. Ke'esh ben Iris. It's like you're putting fire to little chips that catch onto fire right away. It's terrible. So the Gemara explains the Ma'inaf Kimina, what's the difference in these two expressions and how bad it is. They're both not allowed. So what's the difference? If you only have the option to be mevatel one and not the other, so to be mevatel, the women singing and the men responding is worse, because when the men are responding to the women, they're listening closely to be able to respond to them. So that's much worse. Rav Yechanan said, person that drinks and with 4 different type of musical instruments, he brings 5 different punishments into the world. Shenema, the pasuk says, woe to those that wake up in the morning, shecher yedoifu, they run after wine to drink, ma'achri beneshev, they go to sleep late at night, yayin, yadlikem, they run after wine, v'hoya kinar, v'nevel, v'toif, v'chalil, and they have these 4 musical instruments, a harp and a navel. How do they translate navel over there?
Lyre.
A what?
Lyre.
A lyre, okay, and a toif, a drum, and chalil, a pipe or a flute. And v'yayim mishteim, and they drink wine. Vespail Hashem lo yabitu, and they don't look at what the Eibishter does. So these are the 4 different instruments that they play with. Maksiv achrov. Then the pasuk says 5 different punishments. It says l'chein gol ha'amim mibli das. They go into Golas shegerm and Golas leilam. They bring exile into the world. Ukvayde misay rav shemivin rav leilam. They bring hunger into the world. Ha'amayne tzachat sama shegerm l'tayrishet tishtachich milim deh. The thirst that this pasuk is speaking about, tzachat sama, means a very strong thirst. Means that they can't learn Torah. They become thirsty for Torah. They bring a downfall to the haters of Hashem, which refers, it's a euphemism referring to the Eibishter. This term ish in the pasuk refers to the Eibishter himself. Shenem, as the pasuk says, Hashem ish mulchama. The Eibishter is the ish mulchama. And then it says ve'enig vayim tishpalna. It means shegarm and shiflish Yisrael. They bring the downfall of Yidden. Now, after all these 5 punishments, what does the pasuk say afterwards? Sha'ol, which is Gehenim, broadens its mouth, and Upara Pia opens up his mouth, without any limitation, and they all go down into this place because of bringing all these punishments. Okay, so this is all in connection to the first inyan of the Mishnah regarding Zimra, songs and music, Bisman Hazeh. The next thing it says in the Mishnah, Mishamesu Neviim Arishainim. When the first earlier prophets passed away, that's when the Urim V'Tumim stopped. Now, who are the early prophets? David, Ushmuel, Shloimeh. Those are the early Nevi'im, David, Shmuel, and Shloimeh. After their time period, the Urim V'Tumim stopped. Rav Nachman says, Bimei David. Even in the time of David HaMelech, Zimnin Salik, sometimes the Urim V'Tumim was functioning. It was Zimnin Lois Salik. Sometimes it did not give an answer, it did not function. Sharei Shal Tzaddik Valsalai. Tzaddik, he was a Kayin, and he asked by the Urim V'Tumim a question, and it did not work. It did work, that is. Shal of Yasar, V'lai Alsalai. And of Yasar a Kayin, so he asked from the Urim V'Tumim, and it did not work. Shenemar, it says, Vayal of Yasar. Of Yasar was removed from the Gehuna Gedayla because it didn't work by him. So Mosiv Rabbi Bar Shmuel asks in this that we're saying that already so early on the Urim V'Tumim stopped working, but there's a pasuk in a later time period where it says Vayihi Lidorish Alikim. They went to ask Hashem to give an answer. Kol Yemei Zechariah. This was in the time of Zechariah. Hamevin, that understands B'Ra'is Alikim, to see what the Eibishter says. Now my love, Urim V'Tumim. Don't you think that they asked from the Urim V'Tumim in the time of Zechariah, which was much later? He was in the times of the king Yoash, much after Shlomo Melech. So the Gemara says, Loi b'Neviim. That pasuk means that they asked the question by the Neviim, not from the Urim V'Tumim. It wasn't working at that time. Tashema, the Gemara brings a rai from another brayse where it says clearly, Mishachara Beis HaMikdash Rishon. When the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Batlu Arei Migrash, the cities of the Leviim, which had that empty area around it designated for the Leviim, that was nullified. Upaska Urim V'Tumim. And the Urim V'Tumim stopped working. So it says it clearly only at the time of the Churban is when the Urim V'Tumim stopped. Upasak Melech Beis David, and the kingdom of the house of David also stopped. Now, if a person will whisper to you and to say, well, look into the pasuk what it says in the times that is second Beis Hamikdash. The Tishasa says to them, this refers to Ezra, until the Kayin will come back with the Urim V'Tumim. So it seems like that it means then, in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, the Kayin will be there with the Urim V'Tumim. And you should answer him, this is like a person telling his friend, not until Mashiach comes and Tchias HaMesim happens. Over here as well, Urim V'Tumim does not refer to the second Beis Hamikdash, but it means Urim V'Tumim does not return until Mashiach comes. But the point is, you clearly see in this Braise that the Urim V'Tumim was nullified when? By the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, not in the times of Nevi'im or Rishayim, David, Shmuel, or Shloimeh. Elam Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, Man Nevi'im or Rishayim, who are considered to be the earlier Nevi'im, that are all the Nevi'im in the first Beis Hamikdash. And Lafuki, Michage, Zachariah, Malachi, the Achreinim Ninu. Excluding the last three, Chagi, Zachariah, Malachi, they were at the times of the second Beis Hamikdash. In their times, the Urim V'Tumim didn't work. The Tanna Rabbanan that we learned about Chagi, Zachariah, Malachi as follows: Mishemei, Chagi, Zachariah, Malachi, when they passed away, Nistalka, Ruach HaKodesh Yisrael, the Ruach HaKodesh of Yidden was removed. But Va'afat became, but nevertheless, Hayim Mishtamshim beBaskal. Still, a Baskal, a heavenly voice, did come out and give Yidden messages. Shepar Machas. Once it happened. The Yidden were sitting together in this second floor of the house of Guria in the city of Yerichai. Nitna leim Baskal, a Baskal came out and said, Min HaShamayim from heaven, V'Amran announced, Yesh bechem Adam Echad, there's an individual amongst you, Sheroi, Shetirshra Olav Shchina. It is fitting that the Shchina should dwell upon him. His generation is not fitting for this. So who did they look at? They all looked at Hillel HaZaken and they said that it was him, that the Shekhinah would dwell on him like a Navi. And when he passed away, his piduhu, they eulogized him and they said, Hoya Chassid, Hoya Onav, that he was pious and he was humble. A similar story happened, and then they also said Talmid Shel Ezra, that he's a student of Ezra. He wasn't literally a student of Ezra, but similar to Ezra. Ezra came up from Bavel, so Hillel also came up from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. B'shuv Pamacheres, there was another time that this happened. They were sitting together in a second floor in the city of Yavne. A heavenly voice came out, and said to them, There's an individual that's fitting that the Shekhinah should dwell upon him. His generation is not fitting for this. They all looked at Shmuel and they referred to him as Shmuel HaKatan. When he passed away, his pidu, they eulogized him, Haya Anav, he was humble, Haya Chassid, he was pious. And also they said, Talmid Shel Hillel, that he was a Talmud of Hillel. So here the Mashal points out that the order of the Hesped is the opposite. Regarding Hillel it said, Haya Chassid, Haya Anav. And over here it says, Haya Anav, Haya Chassid. Opposite order. So the Mashal says, because there's an argument in another place in the Gemara, what's greater, a Chassid or an Anav? So they were arguing over here, what's greater? When you eulogize, you begin with a praising on a smaller level and you go higher. So the argument over here is whether Anav is higher or Chassid is higher. There's a sikha from the Rebbe about this in Chelik Lamed Ches and Parshas Baal Leischa, where the Rebbe speaks by Arichas over there about various levels of humility, different dargis, that Hillel was on a higher level of Anaveh, so therefore it says Anaveh second, because he was on a higher level. Shmuel HaKatan, he was called Katan because of his Anaveh, but he wasn't on the same level as Anaveh as Hillel, so therefore Anaveh comes first, and then comes Chassid. And they said about him, Talmidei Shel Hillel, he was a Talmud of Hillel, he wasn't exactly on the same level as Hillel, he was a Talmud. Shmuel, when he passed away, he said the following: Shimon v'Yishmael l'charbe, that Reb Shimon and Rabbi Yishmael are going to be killed by a sword. The Chavrai and his friends l'katala, they're going to be killed in other very, very gruesome ways. So Rashi here brings the story regarding Rabbi Akiva, what happened with him, the way he was killed by the Asar Aruge Malchus, and Visharam and others from the nation, from the Yidden, Lebiza, there's going to be plunder. And v'okan sagiyin asidin lemeisa al alma, and a lot of tzaddis is going to come upon the world. Similar, when Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava passed away, Bikshu Loimar, they wanted to eulogize him and say regarding him the similar thing, that Hoya Chassid and Hoya Anav, that he was pious and humble, but the time did not allow for this, and the reason is she'ei maspidin al haruge malchus, because he was killed from the Asar Aruge Malchus, and because he was killed by the government, so therefore they were afraid to eulogize him. V'shachar Beis Hamikdash, then the Mishnah says, when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, batal hashamir. This worm, the shamir, did not work anymore. So what is the story with this shamir? It's with this worm that Shlomo Melech built the Beis Hamikdash. That's what he used to cut the bricks or to cut the racks. Shenema, the pasuk says, "Va'abayis bi banoisoi even shleima masa nivne." Shlomo Melech brought the racks from the mountains, full racks as is, without cutting them, and that's how he built. And he built it and he cut them with this shomer. So hadvarim kiksavan divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says you have to understand this pasuk literally. He did not use any saw or any other utensil to cut these racks, but he just used this shomer. Amalei Rab Nechemia argues and he says, but can you say that he brought these racks whole? But there's another pasuk where it says kol eile avonim yikareis precious racks. And then in there, the pasuk concludes, they were sawed with a saw. So he didn't use the shomer, he did saw them. In Cain, if so, that he did not hear the sound of these metal utensils in the house when they were building. What that means is, that he prepared and cut them on the outside. And once they were prepared, he brought them into the place in the Beis Hamikdash where it was built. So therefore he says, no, they did use saws to cut the racks for the Beis Hamikdash. Amar Rebbe, so Rebbe says, Nirin divri Rabbi Yehuda ba'avne mikdash. I agree to what Rabbi Yehuda says, that they only used this shomer to cut the racks regarding the building of the Beis Hamikdash. That's what Rabbi Yehuda really meant. In the Beis Hamikdash, they used the shomer. But what Rab Nechemia is saying, he's bringing a different pasuk about the home that they built and they used the saw. That's ba'avne beisai. That's regarding the palace that was built for Shlomo Melech himself. According to Rab Nechemia, that even when building the Beis Hamikdash, they also used the saw, so shomer lemayasa. So what were they using this shomer for, not to use a saw? Says the Gemara, what they use the shomer for is, look at the Tanya. As we learned in the Braisa, avana malolu, these precious stones, and we're talking over here about the precious stones that are placed inside the choshen, and in the Eivod, the Avnei Shoyam, and so on. So ain't so they had to inscribe the names of the shvatim in them, but it cannot be written with ink. It says pituche, meaning that it has to be inscribed. And the aim is you also can't use this metal utensil to inscribe it, which means that the stones have to be full. You can't chisel out, you can't write the names in it by chiseling, taking out any of the stone. So how was it done? Here you had the shomer, they marked the names with ink, and then and then they would sort of bring it and show for the shomer that it should go over there where the ink is, and these precious stones split open to create the shape of the names of the shvatim. And what Gemara says, it would split open like this fig that splits open in the summer, but it's not chiseling out, there's nothing missing of it. Or like a valley that in the winter it also splits open the ground, there's nothing missing of it. That's what the shomer was used for. We learned in the Braisa about this shomer. This shomer, it's the size of a little barley. It was created in the Sheish Shmei Bereshis. This is one of the things the Mishnah says was created in Bein Hashmashas. There's nothing, the toughest thing cannot stand in front of it, it splits everything open. So how do you keep it? You have to wrap it in a bundle of, or in bunches of wool. Then you place it into this lead bowl, filled with the subin, with the chaff, with the peels of barley. That's how you keep it. Rabami says, when the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Batla Shira Paranda. Shira Paranda, which is a kind of very good quality silk, was bottled. And also white glass, a certain kind of beautiful crystal or glass, was also bottled. We learned this in a Braisa. When the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Batla Shira Paranda, Schuchas Levana. And the Braisa adds another thing, Rechev Barzel, this metal chariot, some kind of a chariot that was used, I think, to go out into war with it. The Yashayimim and others say, Af Yayin Kadosh, also this wine that was so strong and so thick that it was congealed, Haba mishnir, which comes from Shnir, which is in the north of Eretz Yisrael, Hadoime keigulit vela, and it's so thick that it was like the figs or the pressed figs that's also very thick. The next thing it said in the Mishnah was Neifes Tzufim. When the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Neifes Tzufim was bottled. So what is Neifes Tzufim? So the Gemara brings a few opinions. My Neifes Tzufim, Amar Rav says, Soiles, this is the fine flour in that times that was so good, Shetzafa al Gabi Nafa, that when you try to sift it, so this flour sort of floats above the sifter, and just the flour itself is already so moist that it's like it was already kneaded together with honey and oil. That's how geschmack the flour was. Velevi Yama Levi says it means something else. Shtei kikrais and it is betaner. You have two breads that you attach to the oven. In those times they would attach the breads to the walls of the oven, two sides of the oven. But the bread was such good quality that they would blow up, they would grow, and they would reach and touch each other inside the oven. So at neifes, I think it's connected to the word neifes, which is like branches that reach one another. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Yoma, third pshat, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says that Dvash haba min Tzipia. This was a very good thick honey that came from Tzipia, which is mountains that you could look to far. That's what Tzipia means, to be able to see far. My mashma, how is this mashma that this is what it means? Because the Metargim Rav Sheshes translated a pasuk that the pasuk says, it's the lashon of the pasuk. Some say Rav Yosef over here. The pasuk Rashi brings over here. It says kashetasena hadvairim. The Dvairim that go on the mountain. So he says that what does this mean? Command the knots on the briesa, that these bees they fly, v'shaitim berumi alma, they fly in the heights of the world and the mountains. Umasian dufshe meis vetura, and they bring their honey from the pollen that they get from the plants that they find in the mountains. That's how we taish it. And this is this special honey that they had in those times. Now here it brings another Mishnah regarding this very thick honey. Tanan Hasam, we learned in the Mishnah. Anytime you're pouring from one vessel that's tahir to another vessel that's below it, that's tameh, so even though there's this stream that's pouring and it seemingly is connected, but nevertheless what's in the vessel above remains tahir because it's liquid, and therefore what's in the bottom does not connect to what's on the top. Chutz midvash zifim v'hatzapichim. Besides dvash zifim and tzapichim, these are both honeys that are extremely thick, and so because it's so thick, so the stream it returns back up to the vessel that's tahir, and it gets tameh from the vessel that it goes into. Now the tzapichim we just discussed before. I guess the tzapichim refers over here to the very thick honey that came from the mountains. But my zifim, what is zifim? This is honey that mezaifim by means. Rashi says they would put water or wine added to it because it was so thick, and even after you added other liquids to it, it was still very thick. Zifim means honey that came from a certain place. We see in the pasuk the name of a place, Ziv v'telem ubalis. A similar thing, people from Zifim came to Shaul and said to him about David. My Zifim, what does Zifim there mean? Rav Yechanan says, it refers to people that say things that are lies. Rav Lazar says, no, it doesn't mean lies. It refers to people that came from a certain place. And these are people that came from Ziv. The Mishnah said, people that believe in Hashem stopped. What does it mean? These people that believe in Hashem, so Rashi explains, it doesn't mean that after the Churban Beis Hamikdash there's no amun on the Eibishter at all. But this refers to people that are ready to give up on their money for a purpose of a mitzvah, or for tzedakah, or for Shabbos and Yom Tov, and they're not worried if the Eibishter will give them more money. That's what it refers to. Amun regarding this, basically b'tachin. The Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer Gadol says, Kol mishiyesh le pas pesale, person that has bread in his basket for today. And nevertheless, he's saying to himself, what am I going to eat tomorrow? So he's a person that does not have proper amunah. He doesn't believe in the Eibishter that he's going to provide for him tomorrow. Rabbi Lazar also said, what is the meaning of the pasuk where it says, Ki mi boz liyoim katnus? What is this pasuk referring to? Mi garam letzadikim. Who causes for the tzadikim? She is bazbuz, shulchanam lasad lavai. That their table that's prepared for them, lasad lavai, becomes taken away from them. Katnus shahayaben shleiminu b'kadosh baruch hu. This katnus, that if they don't believe in the Eibishter with this betachan, that if I have today, I shouldn't be worried for tomorrow, that takes away from their table, lasad lavai. Let's just finish off the saying here. Rava says a little bit of a different shot on this pasuk here. Rava ma elu ketane b'nei Rishei Yisrael. These are the children from the Rishayim shem mevazbezin din aviem lasad lavai. They are mevazbez, the punishment that their fathers would get in the time to come, lasad lavai. How is that? Ayimrim lefanav. They say today, b'sheribayin shleilam master of the universe, ma'achashat asad lipada mehem. If you're going to in the future punish them, lama keisa shineim bam. So why are you causing them to have tzad also in this time now, even in this world? And how is that? Because we are passing away. The children of these Rishayim are passing away even today. And that's what it means over here when it says in the pasuk, Kimi Bazli, Yom Katnos, that instead of them getting punished, these Rishayim, they get punished today by these children that are passing away.